On June 25, 1941, President Roosevelt issued Executive Order 8802, establishing the fair employment by the armed forces. From 1942 to 1949, a few brave African-American men changed the face of the United States Marine Corps forever. Faced with many challenges, they set out to make a difference and ended up making history. Listen as 3 Montford Point Marines share a personal story of honor, courage, and commitment.
My name is Robert D. Reed. Served 26 years in the Corps from 1948 till 1974. The reason why I joined the Marine Corps was because at the time there was a draft, and when I graduated from high school, my buddies and I said, let's find out what the military is all about. Collectively, we said, let's do the Marine Corps. They seem to be some pretty tough guys. Now, we had joined. We weren't drafted, we joined the Marine Corps. They never told us that we were going to a separate boot camp. Well, the first couple of weeks was pure hell. My drill instructor, he was the one that told us that if you're going to be a black Marine, you're going to have to be better than anybody else. Better.
Subjected to very intense training, Reed and his fellow Montford Point Marines endured the hardships of boot camp, pushing them to limits most Marines had never experienced.
Well, the thing is, after my tour was up, came back to the States, and it just so happened that the Marine Aviation wanted to get blacks into their ranks. And I was one of the first blacks to go into Marine Aviation as an enlisted man. And my time in aviation wasn't until I got out of the Marine Corps.
Not only did the Montford Point Marines open doors, but they helped to set a precedent of courage for today's African-American Marines.
The Marine Corps was the last military service to be integrated. And I think that was the beginning of a new era of the Marine Corps.
The Montford Point Marines are extremely important. They were strong enough to take on a challenge that seemed to be insurmountable at that particular time. And for them, I do serve.
My name is Gene Dowdy. I was born in Stamford, Connecticut. I was really appointed by the Navy Department to serve in the Marines. 7 months after the famous 8802 presidential proclamation allowed us to go into the Marine Corps. So I was one of the original pioneers. Montford Point Camp was a segregated camp. We felt the indignity that was thrown at us, but we had to learn, we had to face all of these challenges that we had.
Shortly after graduating from boot camp, Gene Dowdy's typical duties as an admin clerk shifted as the Commandant began increasing the responsibilities of African-American Marines in the war campaign.
We ended up on the Yellow Beaver Jima. I landed on D-Day, incidentally, with a few ammunition companies and depot companies. It was very unpleasant, but I prevailed. I was glad to be in the Marine Corps, and I'm glad that I was honorably discharged. But going into the military service, I would consider, again, very gainful and a real true benefit.
The legacy of the Montford Point Marines, much like the famed 54th Infantry Regiment and the Tuskegee Airmen, is significant in the history of America and its armed forces.
I think it's something that a lot of people need to hear, to appreciate what they've actually done and to appreciate the opportunity that they created.
Charles O. Foreman. I joined the Marine Corps because I happen to be one of those people who does not like to be drafted. If I've got to do something, I like to do it on my own. I was ordered to go to Jacksonville, North Carolina, Montford Point. My experience in the boot camp was very typical.
During Foreman's time at the Montford Point camp, conditions were tough, as they were forced to build and live in wooden huts surrounded by the heavily rugged Jacksonville, North Carolina terrain.
After boot camp, the war in the Pacific was of course proceeding, and what was created was what they call the First Colored Replacement Battalion. And this was a group of men, I believe it was about 100 in the group. At that time, I think I had been promoted to a 3-stripe sergeant, and I was responsible for all these people We sailed out of San Diego to Oahu. While there, I carried the title of acting first sergeant. Well, we actually stayed there for the duration of the war. If you asked me the question if I had it to do over again, yes, I would do it over again. Being in the Marine Corps helped because it gave me the backbone not to accept what was handed down. If you want something, you better stand up and fight for it.
Today, there are thousands of African American Marines serving in all fields and in every occupational specialty of the Marine Corps.
If a Montford Point Marine walked up to me today, I would say thank you. Thank you for paving the way. Thank you for creating an opportunity for myself and my brothers in arms that's come before me and those that are come after me.
The spirit of our Corps, embodied in the eagle, globe, and anchor, lives within the soul of every Marine. This spirit is born through arduous rite of passage at boot camp and officer training, after which a young man or woman is called a United States Marine for the first time. Our ethos has been shaped by ordinary men and women, patriots who showed extraordinary leadership and courage, both physical and moral.
From 1942 to 1949, approximately 20,000 African American men enlisted in the Marine Corps at a time when our nation was at war and the country and military services were resistant to integration. They came from the North and from the South, from all walks of life. They came for different reasons. Some wanted the challenge of being a Marine, some wanted to earn a living, but all came to protect and serve their country honorably. They arrived on a rugged and heavily wooded 5.5-acre site near Jacksonville, North Carolina, called Montford Point. The first group of these pioneering Marines built the now famous camp of wooden huts. Others that followed fell in on their handiwork. They braved a variety of threats, everything from the swagger sticks of tough drill instructors to the snakes and the mosquitoes, and even those bears that inhabited the land. In many cases, they were challenged harder than their white counterparts, entering the Corps at the same time.
These brave Marines served with honor during a critical period in our nation's history, fighting in some of the bloodiest struggles in the Pacific, Saipan, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa. Some died in these epic island battles. Many others continued their service in the colds of Korea and the jungles of Vietnam. Many Montford Point veterans, men like Gilbert Hashmark Johnson, Edgar Huff, and Frederick C. Branch, are now legends in the rich history of the Marine Corps.
In June of 1942, I saw a newspaper article to the effect that the Marine Corps had begun accepting Negroes for service with the Corps.
Well, you know, you can't think of being Marine without thinking about the Montford Pointers, because they are the beginning. You often question yourself, could I have done that? Could I have had the perseverance to come and to join an organization, first, that didn't want you, two, that had the history of being the last service to integration?
The Marine Corps, basically, in the early days, were looking for the best black men that they could find. Four corners of the country. We had men coming in who had their degrees. Some had both their degrees and had a couple of years in vocation. We call them the mighty platoon.
We knew we were being trained harder, and of course the DIs would tell us that you know, they're going to make us superior to all of the other white Marines, particularly. In fact, as a matter of fact, we were breaking every record that they ever had because they pushed us to the end of endurance to where we just couldn't go any further.
You think about where they came and why they came. Many of them were doing just fine where they are. Some were educators, some were professional ball players, some even owned their own business. Some were farmers, and some were just working in factories. But they came because they felt in their heart of hearts that our nation needed their support, needed them to be a part of what was good about America. And a lot of them felt that when they came, or when they provided their contributions, that somehow that they would convince the world, as well as America, that they had earned the right to all of the rights and privileges there are of being Americans.
I went in late enough, and we had all white officers, but we had black drill instructors.
Hatchmark Johnson was much older than we were. He had spent about 3 tours in the Army, and he came and had about 2 tours in the Navy, and that's how he got to be called Hatchmark. He got the service, he earned service stripes, so he had about 3 of them, I think.
Hatchmark was a very strong disciplinarian. In contrast, Huff was about twice the size of Hatchmark, and Huff was a big guy. And whereas Hatchmark would issue stern disciplinary kinds of orders, Huff would walk up to you softly and knock you on the deck if you didn't comply.
I left home to join the Marine Corps, and when I joined the Marine Corps, when I got to Montford Point, I had 25 cents in my pocket. That's all I had. In the last suit, I had it on, and I came to the Marine Corps to stay.
Huff was strictly went on the DI, and he was a tough guy, tall, big, and strong. And so when he spoke to you, you moved. You didn't dare say anything because you know, like I said, you were his mercy. As I said, they could do anything they wanted to do, and they did.
The Marine Corps today is much better than it was for the minority. I see sergeants, majors, I see generals, colonels. When I got out of the Marine Corps, there was only 1 lieutenant.
Remember when they came in, there was no black officers at all. Matter of fact, when Fred Branch in 1945 was the first African-American commissioned, one of the stipulations that he had to come from the Montford Point Marines.
But I always look at the photograph of Fred receiving his second lieutenant commission, the big smile on his face and his lovely lady beside him. I have a pretty good idea what Fred went through, but I have no idea what his personal experiences were. Given the times, I just have to assume that Fred caught hell.
Now we've got generals with 3 stars, so that's a big change. And then myself, when I went as a private, I never had any concept that we'd ever have a black officer, and yet I became one of them.
There's no question. Especially after I had an opportunity to meet them and become a part of them and be mentored by them, that when you listen to their stories of their struggles and the things that they did, and more particularly the things that they did to overcome adversity, they were all tools that I put in my kit bag. And as I came up, as I matured through the Marine Corps and encountered some of the similar things that they did, but nothing at all close to what they had been through in the 40s. You know, I would remember things that they said, things they did, and use it to help me. One of the things they taught me was, you know, if you're focused on your mission, if you know what you want to do, nobody can stop you from doing that.
So you want to think that you step into the footsteps of these giants and the legacy for which they have left you, that you measure up. And so that inspiration is beyond words because of what they have done as a part of that fabric of the creating America history.
And they told me that they're climbing up on my shoulders, but they did the work. They did the work. And I'm very proud of them.
It's the responsibility of the Marine Corps to anchor the story of Montford Point in the annals of the Marine Corps' rich history. Every Marine, from private to general, should know the history of the Montford Point Marines, who crossed the threshold to fight not only the enemy they were to know overseas, but that of racism and segregation in their very own country. Collectively, they paved the way for the many thousands of Marines of various backgrounds, men and women alike, who serve our nation today with honor, courage, and commitment.